G'day all. I have to apologise from the start. I've been nursing a cough for the past few weeks and I promise I've been tested and I'm negative. And I realise a cough is worse than yelling bomb on a commercial flight these days, so there may be the odd cough there and I'm apologising in advance. But this is going to be super squeaky, I feel like. We'll try anyway. Yeah, it's great to be back at Sydney Flyrodders. As Dennis mentioned earlier on, I think it was maybe 15 when I first joined the Sydney Flyrodders. To be honest, I just saw that they had cool prizes in the comps that they ran out at Oberon, and I lived out that way, and I wanted to win those prizes. So I joined the club and have been, I guess, involved with the club probably ever since. There was moments when I lived far out west and I didn't make it to meetings, and of recent I have five little boys, 5 and under. Sorry, 3 little boys, 5 and under. So 5 would definitely keep me busy, 3 is enough. And running a business. So haven't been as involved with the club, but it's great to be back. And I know Mickey represented Aussie Fly Fisher last year for our annual visit, which was cool too. So what I was going to cover a bit tonight is actually quite a lot of stuff. So the last 12 months for everyone has been a different 12 months, and running a fly fishing business throughout that time was obviously quite a different time for us as well. And I do remember it was the 28th of March, 2020 was the last day that we officially guided any clients, and that was about the time that New South Wales said it probably wasn't appropriate to take people out and get people to travel out of the city and go fishing. So for us, we stopped guiding then, and I remember it was May 24th when we were able to start working again. And so for 2 months, we didn't do any travel, any guiding, any courses or anything, and actually count ourselves lucky, and not from a political edge at all, but I feel really lucky to live in New South Wales. Running a business like the one that we run, we've been able to operate the entire time other than those 2 months. And yeah, I'm thankful for the way that our state has handled the pandemic, because we've ended up having a really good year in terms of people coming locally fishing. And to be honest, when the pandemic hit, I think I was just like, okay, we've had drought, we've had fires, we've had floods, let's give the pandemic a go. So definitely an interesting few years, and for anyone that's lived in this area, you'd know, particularly those marginal areas, and New South Wales had a pretty rough drought for essentially about 8 years, but the last 2 of those years were really rough, and many farms that we would visit and we fished for many years, guys that are 80, 90 years old would tell us they've never seen the creek stop, or they've never seen that river stop, they've never seen that dam dry. So that's, I guess, the depressing part of my talk, because everything else is good news. And from that point, when we started back up in May, a very popular word for the pandemic for businesses has been to be flexible or to pivot, and for us that meant focusing a lot more on our local offerings and building up our local guiding and seeing what we could do internally within the realms of Australia. Definitely around times where state borders and different restrictions meant that we had to do things a little bit differently, but it's actually not been too bad of the 12 months. So what I wanted to go through tonight was initially some options around if you wanted to do a bit of a destination style trip within the realms of Australia, some of the nice options out there. We spent particularly the last 6 months visiting some of these areas, and some that we've fished before and others that we're exploring for the first time, and it actually has been quite nice, and that's a positive that I see from these last 12 months, is people focusing locally and just finding great things on our home shores. So the very first one I'm going to take you through is probably the furthest you can go. Let's see if this is going to work for me. So Cocos Keeling Island is one of the recent trips we've done actually, and it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's probably the furthest you can get from Sydney at the moment while still being in Australia. Cocos Keeling Island is a part of the Commonwealth. It's essentially governed by Western Australia, and it's got quite an interesting history. Half of the island is essentially Australian expats, and the other side is of Malaysian descent. Initially, John Keeling, I believe in the 1700s, found it. He was a Scottish merchant cruising around. And beautiful little island. If you drew a line between Perth and Sri Lanka, it's literally in the middle in the Indian Ocean. It's a long way. You can only get there by Virgin Airways, which is kind of strange. Normally Qantas would fly that sort of route. It's heading out towards, I guess, Christmas Island, not the so fishable one. As anytime you go to a travel agent, you tell them you want to fly to Christmas Island, you normally have to tell them which one. And yeah, it's a beautiful place to fish. For us, it's essentially, as far as I see it, one of the only true flats bone fisheries of Australia. If you want to go and walk and wade for bonefish in shallow water, this is currently your option. Because, yeah, as we know, you know, Christmas Island, I mean, even I believe Cook Islands out of Taki, which is a great fishery as well, have sort of reopened, but you have to be in New Zealand 14 days before you go there. Cocos Keeling Islands, you fly via Perth, and you can travel there and go fishing for bonefish. So this was back in March. It's actually got some really nice size bonefish. That's a fairly, I'd say, average to above average one. There's quite a lot of 10-pound bonefish there. It's the limitation of Cocos Keeling Island is accommodation. So essentially, if it's somewhere you want to go, you have to book ahead. Nick, who I'm standing next to there, has an accommodation on the island, and obviously we stayed there, and we're looking to build up a bit of a program to go fishing there in the future. In terms of season, the most likely times people would go there, typically over those summer months. You do get the trade winds throughout the winter. Not that the wind is too crazy there, but definitely a nice summer option. Beautiful flats, clear water. This one's called Direction Island. So most of our trip we actually just did by walking around or driving around. During the week there's the odd ferry you can take to some of the other islands. Nick has actually acquired a flats boat since, so definitely open up the fishing. Some big GTs there. We're putting a film together on this place, and this scenario is actually incredible. We rocked up one day and there was, I would say, 300-400 sharks in a black mass, and it was being circled by GTs of this size. And actually after the first GT, the others were quite difficult to catch, but they were really aggressive sharks. When you got in the water, they were coming after you. So, but
is that the video that we saw on?
Yeah, so there was a video that made it to American morning TV, which was quite funny, watching them narrate me getting attacked by a shark. But essentially, I was hooked onto a small bluefin trevally that ran through my legs, and it wrapped around my leg, and the shark was adamant it wanted that bluefin trevally. So it created some, some unusual footage. This is Direction Island, part of Cocos there. So as you can see, it's much like any beautiful Pacific or Indian Ocean atoll. Gorgeous clear waters and flats, and definitely that element of history. So these are the 6-inch guns that line the entry to the atoll that were put there during World War II. It's actually, I don't want to get this wrong, but I believe HMAS Sydney in World War I, it's the first naval battle that took place for Australians during World War I. They sunk a German ship on the atoll there, and some fighting took place. In World War II, not a lot happened. I believe they were, just in proximity to the Japanese. They didn't want to sort of highlight themselves. There was a cable that ran basically from there to Singapore and back to Australia, and they kept pretty quiet during the war just to not make sure people knew where they were, but they had a few guns there. So quite a interesting scenery and the history going around. Pretty simple island in terms of the food. They like to pretend that there's 7 different restaurants you can eat at 7 different nights of the week, but it's pretty much the same guy that just moves building every night. It's quite pleasant. And there is a lot of bonefish there. So I was just walking along one of the flats on the ocean side with the underwater camera there, taking some photos, and hundreds of bonefish swimming around. So, as I say, it is an important one at the moment because, in general, I guess the access that we have to go to other places to fish for shallow water bonefish at the minute are quite minimal, and Cocos Keeling Island does offer a really good scenario. There was one fish that I really wanted to catch when I went to Cocos Keeling, which was that one there. It's got a bump-headed wrasse, and they are very frustrating. They're actually incredible fish. You see them, they tail, throw these big blue tails out on the flats. They get really shallow, and you can spend half an hour sneaking into position, raise your rod to go to cast, and then they'll just spook. They also essentially don't naturally want to eat a fly from what most people can gather. They're just a curious fish. If your fly happens to be in the way, they may pick it up, and if you're in contact. So I ended up actually catching them at 8 weight, which is not what I wanted to catch a bumhead on. But that was on the last day, so I was actually really, really happy. It was the fish I'd like to catch. Cocos keeling.
What are some of the other species that you might encounter there?
Yeah, so I guess typical of that Pacific Indian Ocean atolls, there are triggerfish. They're actually really, really big triggerfish. There just don't seem to be a lot of them. Bluefin trevally, bunch of little wrassy things, long-nosed emperor, GTs, as I say. I believe Cocos, it's a really good bonefish fishery with some cool added extras if you're prepared to go the miles to try and get that big GT or that bump-headed wrasse, or you can definitely catch a lot of sharks on fly if you're into that as well. But sometimes you just get sick of them, so you just cast at the shark and they're very willing to eat a fly. It's quite a good fight on a 12 weight. So.
Yeah.
Like Cocos keeling, really cool place, if particularly bonefish is your thing. So I ended up in the Tiwi Islands, and I know Steve's talked about the Tiwi already. He was actually on Melville Island. So Tiwi Island actually means 2 islands, and it's made up of Melville Island and Bathurst Island. We went over on the Bathurst Island side. It was a really random trip.